Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Dandavat Pranam.
Dandavat Pranam. Hare Krishna. Should we start?
As I can see, Prabhuji, very less devotees has joined. Wait. Or as you say, Prabhuji.
No, whatever you say. So should we start with prayers?
I think we shall start, Prabhuji.
Om Jnana-timirandasya Jnana-jana-shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sujivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitam Sha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashatya Deshatarine Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namane Gauratvishe Namaha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Deenabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Krishna. Okay, so yesterday we had discussed the first two sections of the chapter. So we saw Krishna is describing his Aishwarya Gyan. And so in the 4th and the 5th verses, he describes his energies, the Apara Shakti, Apara Prakriti, Para Prakriti, the inferior energy, the superior energy. So there are the various material elements which constitute the inferior energy, the spirit souls constitute the superior energy. So then, and then finally Krishna says in the 7th verse that he is the cause of everything. And then we discussed that how there is no difference between Shakti and Shaktiman. So that was essentially the first section. And then in the next section from 8 to 12, Krishna speaks about, he gives some examples as to how he is present everywhere. He is responsible for everything. He is doing so many different activities, the essence of everything. He maintains everything. So many different examples by which we can remember Krishna even in everyday life. So that was the second section of the chapter. So now we proceed on to the third section. So the third section is the 13th and the 14th verses. The three modes are controlled by Krishna, therefore, sorry. So 13th verse. Ribir gunamayer bhaver ebi sarvamidam jagat mohitam nabi janati mamebhya paramavyayam. Deluded by the three modes, goodness, passion, ignorance, the whole world does not know me, who am above the modes and inexhaustible. So in the last verse, Krishna spoke about how he is the source of the three modes of material nature, but he is not affected by the modes. And so here he's describing how the entire world's Tribir Gunamayer Bhaver Ebi Sarvam Idam Jagat, how the entire world is being influenced by the three modes, is being put into illusion, Mohitam. So everyone is illusioned by the three modes, and as a result of that, Nabi Janati, Mam. So as a result of the illusion due to the three modes, nobody can understand the Supreme Lord. So they cannot understand that the Supreme Lord is Param Avyayam. Param means he is transcendental to the modes. Avyayam means he is inexhaustible. He is eternal. So all these truths about the Supreme Lord cannot be understood as long as one is influenced by the three modes. So Srila Prabhupada begins his purport by saying the whole world is enchanted by the three modes of material nature. Those who are bewildered by these three modes cannot understand that transcendental to this material nature is the Supreme Lord Krishna. In the next paragraph, Srila Prabhupada describes the Varnashram system, how the four Varnas are essentially due to the influence of the three modes. And that has already been discussed in the fourth chapter, Chaturvarnyamaya Shishtam Guna Karma Vibhagasha. So we know the Brahmanas are essentially in the mode of goodness, the Kshatriyas in the mode of passion, the Vaishyas in the modes of passion and ignorance, and the Shudras essentially in ignorance. So that is how everyone is influenced by the three modes. In the third paragraph, Prabhupada writes, there are many different kinds of living entities, human beings, demigods, animals, etc. And each and every one of them is under the influence of material nature, and all of them have forgotten the transcendental personality of Godhead. Okay, so because of the influence of the three modes, it becomes very difficult for one to recognize the Supreme Lord. So those who are in the modes of passion, ignorance, and even those who are in the mode of goodness cannot go beyond the impersonal Brahman conception of the absolute truth. So even those who are in the mode of goodness, like the Jnanis, they also can only understand about the impersonal aspect of the Supreme. They cannot get the full understanding of the Supreme unless one is on the transcendental platform. So now, how powerful is the influence of the three modes and how to get free from the influence of three modes? That is what the Lord is describing in the next verse. Famous verse. Devi Esha Gunamai Mama Maya Duratyaya Mameva Ye Prapadyante Maya Metam Tarantite. This divine energy of mind consisting of the three modes of material nature is difficult to overcome, but those who have surrendered unto me can easily cross beyond it. Please read the purport.
Hare Krishna.
Hi.
The Supreme Personality of Godhead has innumerable energies, and all these energies are divine. Although the living entities are part of his energies and are therefore divine. Due to contact with material energy, their original superior power is covered. Being thus covered by material energy, one cannot possibly overcome its influence. As previously stated, both the material and spiritual natures, being emanations from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, are eternal. The living entities belong to the eternal superior nature of the Lord, but due to contamination by the inferior nature, matter, their illusion is also eternal. The conditioned soul is therefore called Nitya Bhaddha, or eternally conditioned. No one can trace out the history of his becoming conditioned at a certain date in material history. Consequently, his release from the clutches of material nature is very difficult. Even though that material nature is an inferior energy, because material energy is ultimately conducted by the supreme will, which is the living entity cannot overcome. Inferior material nature is defined herein as divine nature due to its divine connection and movement by the divine will. Being conducted by divine will, material nature, although inferior, acts so wonderfully in the construction and destruction of the cosmic manifestation. The Vedas confirms this as follows. Mayam tu prakritim vidyan mayinam tu maheshwaram. Although Maya, illusion is false or temporary, the background of Maya is the supreme magician, the personality of Godhead, who is Maheshwara, the supreme controller. Shvetashvatara Upanishad 4.10. Another meaning of guna is rope. It is to be understood that the conditioned soul is tightly tied by the ropes of illusion. A man bound by the hands and feet cannot free himself. He must be helped by a person who is unbound. Because the bound cannot help the bound, the rescuer must be liberated. Therefore, only Lord Krishna or his bona fide representative, the spiritual master, can release the conditioned soul. Without such superior help, one cannot be freed from the bondage of material nature. Devotional service or Krishna consciousness can help one gain such release. Krishna, being the Lord of the illusionary energy, can order this insurmountable energy to release the conditioned soul. He orders this release out of his causeless mercy on the surrendered soul and out of his paternal affection for the living entity, who is originally a beloved son of the Lord. Therefore, surrendered onto the lotus feet of the Lord is the only means to get free from the clutches of the stringent material nature. The words Mam Eva are also significant. Mam means onto Krishna, Vishnu only, and not Brahma or Shiva. Although Brahma and Shiva are greatly elevated and are almost on the level of Vishnu, it is not possible for such incarnations of a Rajoguna, passion, and Tamoguna, ignorance, to release the conditioned soul from the clutches of Maya. In other words, both Brahma and Shiva are also under the influence of Maya. Only Vishnu is the master of Maya. Therefore, he alone can give release to the conditioned soul. The Vedas, Shvetashvatara Upanishad 3.8 confirms this in the phrase Tam eva viditva, or freedom is possible only by understanding Krishna. Even Lord Shiva affirms that liberation can be achieved only by the mercy of Vishnu. Lord Shiva says, Mukti pradata sarvesham Vishnu evana samshayaha. There is no doubt that Vishnu is the deliverer of liberation for everyone.
Right. So here, the Lord himself is describing the power of the material energy. Devi Esha Gunamayi Mama Maya Duratya. Here, the first word is Devi, transcendental. So Srila Prabhupada is explaining in the purport that why the material energy is called as Devi or divine, because material energy is ultimately conducted by the supreme will, being conducted by the divine will, or before that, inferior material nature is defined herein as divine nature due to its divine connection and movement by the divine will. Being conducted by the divine will, material nature, although inferior, acts so wonderfully in the construction, destruction of the cosmic manifestation. So after all, the material energy is the energy of the Supreme Lord. So therefore Devi, therefore divine, because of the connection to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So after all, the material energy is Krishna's energy. And so because it is Krishna's energy, therefore it is extremely powerful. So in the Brahma Samhita also it is said, Chayeva yasya bhuvanani vibharti Durga. So Durga, the material energy, is acting like a chaya. Chaya means shadow. So just like the shadow of a person cannot act independently. So if you see shadow, if there's shadow of my hand, then that shadow moves exactly according to how I move my hand. The shadow is never independent. So similarly, the material energy is also like a shadow of the Supreme Lord. The material energy acts totally in accordance to the direction of the Supreme Lord. And because of that divine connection to the Supreme Lord, the material energy is extremely powerful. So therefore, he is saying Duratya. Duratya means extremely difficult to cross or extremely difficult to overcome. So the material energy is extremely difficult to overcome. Duratya. Devi Esha Gunamayi. So as Srila Prabhupada is explaining, the word guna also means rope. So the three modes, they bind the living entities as if tied by ropes. So therefore, Srila Prabhupada in so many of his lectures explains that practically the living entity has no independence in the material world. So somebody may say, no, we are independent. I can do whatever I like. I can eat whatever I like. I can choose my career. I can choose my job. I can choose so many things. So I'm independent. So how can we say that the living entity has hardly any independence in the material world? And we would like to answer this.
Hare Krishna.
Yes.
Prabhuji, it's very minute, very limited independence we have, and ultimately the sanction of Krishna should be there, even if the four factors are there.
Okay, that's correct. That's correct. So, but still somebody can say, I have independence. You may say it's minute, but still independence is there. So, just like somebody may say, oh, I'm independent. I can smoke, I can drink, I can do whatever I like. Yes. Okay, Harshita Madhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, Pranam.
Hi.
Prabhuji, we can, as marginal energy, we can only choose to be under the control of either the material energy or superior energy. At the end, we are under the control only, but we can only choose which one. Like if we choose to.
Okay, that's correct. We can choose to be either under the material energy or the spiritual energy. That's correct. So, okay, that is fine. That is as far as devotees are concerned. Devotees have the choice. But we're not talking about devotees. We're talking about materialistic people. So materialistic people also may say, oh, we have a choice. I can choose whether to go to this movie or that movie. I can choose my career. I can choose my job. I can choose so many things. So I'm independent. So how will you prove to a materialistic person that actually there's no independence?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yes.
Prabhuji, like Prabhupada sometimes gives the example that although anyone says that he is independent, but death can come anytime. When death comes, there is no independence. He cannot say wait for a second also. And one more example he gives, that by your independence you can eat maybe 10 rasgullas, but then immediately you will have indigestion. So where is your control?
Yes, that's good. That's a good point. So yes, so even though one may say I have independence, but then one is bound by the reactions of our activities. So yes, Srila Prabhupada gives this example that I may think I can eat as much as I like, but if I eat even a little more than what I require, immediately there'll be indigestion. So I have to face the reaction. Then Prabhupada says, then for the next 3 days you have to fast. So it appears as if there's independence, but actually there's no independence because one is bound by the reactions of one's activities. So Prabhupada also gives example, just like a person living in the state. So he may think, oh, I have independence, I can go against the laws of the government. Okay, fine. He can go against the laws of the government, but then immediately there'll be reaction. So immediately he'll be arrested by the police, he'll be put in jail. So in this way, practically the jiva has hardly any independence in this material world. So that's how the living entity is bound, as if tied by ropes. So even that little independence which one may have is actually controlled by the modes. And therefore, the independence of the living entity is practically nil. It's very insignificant. So, therefore, it's being said, Turatyaya, that to get free from the influence of three modes is very, very difficult. So, Srila Prabhupada says that if a person is bound by the hands and legs, then who can release him? Only a person who's not bound, whose hands and legs are free, only he can release. So, similarly, there is only one personality who is free from the influence of three modes, and that is the Supreme Personality of God. And so therefore, because only he is free from the influence of the three modes, therefore only he or his bona fide representative can release the jiva from the influence of the three modes. Nobody else can do that. And as Srila Prabhupada is quoting from the Upanishads, Mukti pranata sarvesham Vishnur evana samshaya. So only Krishna or Vishnu can award liberation to the living entities. Nobody else can do that. Not even Brahma or Shiva can give liberation to the living entities. And so therefore, ultimately, it is only by surrendering to the Supreme Lord, when the Supreme Lord is pleased with our activities, then he orders the release of the conditioned soul from the influence of Maya. Srila Prabhupada gives the example that just like if one enters a house, a big house where there's a big dog, and as soon as one enters, then the big dog immediately starts barking and then jumps on you. Then what can be done? The only thing that one can do is to call out to the owner of the dog. So when the owner of the dog is called, and then the owner calls the dog back, then the dog quietly goes away. So similarly, Maya is like a shadow. Maya is like a servant of the Supreme Lord. So if you want to gain release from the influence of the three modes, it is only possible by taking shelter of the Lord and his bona fide representatives. Mam eva. Eva means certainly, there is no other way. Mam eva ye prapadyante mayam etam tarat. So in order to cross the illusory energy, the only way is to take shelter of the Lord and his bona fide representatives. Then only it is possible. Then Krishna orders the release of the living entity from the influence of the three modes. That is the only way it is possible. Okay, fine. Any questions on this discussion so far?
Hare Krishna. So, Prabhuji, the answer is that we have a very negligible independence. And even if we try to be independent by choosing anything, whatever we want to do, but we are subject to the laws of three modes of nature.
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
And actually, even that little independence we have, that is also controlled by the modes. To give an example, just like if there is a chronic drunkard, and if one keeps a bottle of wine in front of him, what will he do? So now, theoretically, he has a choice whether to drink or not. But what will he do? He will drink anyways. Why? Because even that little independence which he has is also influenced by the lower modes. So that is how the three modes are practically totally binding the living entities. So even the desire of the jiva is also influenced by the three modes. So that is how one becomes totally bound by the three modes. So yes, theoretically, the little independence is there. But even that ability to use that independence in the right direction is influenced by the modes. And that is how the living entity practically has no independence in the material world. So only when one actually comes to sattva, so in sattva gun, sattvat sanjayate jnanam. So on the platform of sattva gun, when one gets some knowledge, then with that knowledge, he can discriminate between right and wrong. And then actually he can make choices between doing one activity or the other. Otherwise, in material life, ultimately, the person may say, oh, I have independence to make choices. But then ultimately, what independence is that? Because ultimately, all activities are simply meant for sense gratification. So just like if a person says, oh, I have independence to watch this movie or that movie, what difference it makes, this movie or that movie? It is all sense gratification. Or the person may say, oh, I have choice to choose between this career or that career. But this career or that career, ultimately, the whole purpose is sense gratification. So ultimately, what is the choice? There is no choice there. So actually, only when a person comes to sattva and then he begins to distinguish between right and wrong, then the question of choosing between two things actually begins on the platform of sattva. Otherwise, in materialistic life, a person is practically bound by the three modes with no independence. No independence. All right.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yes,
Yes.
Prabhuji.
Sorry, Mataji, please continue.
Yes, Prabhuji. So the broader answer, the more detailed answer is this, that as long as the living being is getting everything, whatever he or she wants for sense gratification, they will not realize that there is somebody who is their controller also.
Yes.
And when they realize that something is not happening as they want, then they will come to the understanding, oh, there is somebody, why my desires are not getting fulfilled. And then they will ask, and then they will think that there is some control over my desires also.
Yes. Yes, that's correct.
Very nice. Thank you. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Yes, some other question?
Prabhuji, a follow-up question on this. Like you said, actually, we don't have any choice. The choice is controlled by the modes. But in the first place, the drunkard, when he first started drinking, at that time, he chose to associate with that with which mode he wanted to associate. Isn't it like when we were not practicing, at some point, he would do Krishna, like, when we were not practicing. So how does we have choice in which
Yes, so that's due to association of devotees. So due to association of devotees, then one gets the bhakti, from the devotees, and then that's how devotional service begins. Then one actually begins to discriminate between what is right and what is wrong. So therefore, the credits for the jiva to begin devotional service does not go to the jiva. It actually goes to the devotee association. So because of the devotee association, one is influenced by the devotee to begin the practice of devotional service. So, of course, this is a detailed discussion that hopefully will be done in the Nectar of Devotion. But then actually it is not the jiva. Of course, the jiva is choosing to accept devotional service. That is fine, but it's only because of the association of the devotee. So therefore, that credit, it does not go to the jiva. It is because of the devotee association he becomes influenced, and because of the devotee's desire to give bhakti to the living entity. So that is how, by the grace of the devotee, one actually gets bhakti. So it's not actually the free will of the jiva at that point of time, because at that point of time the jiva does not know only between what is right and what is wrong. So it is not that he chooses to practice bhakti because of a conscious decision to do something right. Actually, we can all reflect on how we came to devotional service. So actually, we come to devotional service basically because the devotee, he gives us some form of devotional service, which is also pleasing to our senses. Correct? So just like take prasadam. So initially when one is given prasadam, do we accept the prasadam? Oh, because it is Krishna's mercy. No, we accept prasadam because it is tasty. That's all. So ultimately, it is in one sense gratification. Okay. Because we like something, or it is something, the activity is pleasing to the senses, whether it is eating prasadam or whether it is hearing Krishna conscious music. So ultimately, it is pleasing to the senses, therefore we agree to perform that activity. And that is how the devotee actually tricks the jiva to accept devotional service. So therefore, the credit goes to the devotee. At that point of time, the jiva doesn't know what is right, what is wrong. So it is not a conscious decision on the basis of what is right and what is wrong. He accepts the activity because it is pleasing to the senses. Hope that helps.
Thank you, Prabhuji. It is very interesting.
Hare Krishna. Okay, so, anything else on this topic?
Prabhuji, can I ask one more question? So where is the first link? Because devotees approach so many people, hardly few people comes up. So it is by previous janmas sukriti or this janma.
Yes, that's right. That's right. So basically, it is because of sukriti. When the sukriti matures, then the jiva becomes favorable, becomes slightly attracted to accepting the process of devotional service. So anyway, again, that's a whole different topic for discussion, how somebody accepts the process of devotional service. Okay.
Yes, thank you so much.
Hare Krishna. So, but the important point here is that the jiva is totally controlled by the three modes, and just like a person tied by the hands and legs. And so therefore, the only way one can become free from that influence of the three modes is by taking shelter of the Supreme Lord and his representative. And so therefore, what is important for us is that if we want to become free from the influence of the three modes, then it is very essential that we follow the instructions of the Lord and his bona fide representatives. If we do not follow, then there is hardly any scope for becoming freed from the influence of three modes. So then one becomes bound, then material life basically continues, life after life. So if one wants to become free from the influence of the three modes, then one has to take the process of devotional service very seriously surrender and follow the instructions of Guru and Krishna. So to the degree one follows the process seriously, to that degree one can become free from the influence of three modes. Mam eva. Eva means certainly. There is no other way. There is only one way by which one can become free from the influence of modes, and that is by surrendering to the Supreme. Okay, fine. So now we go to the next section. So then apparently it appears that becoming free from the influence of three modes is simple. One simply has to surrender to the Supreme Lord. But then still we find that there are so many people who do not surrender. So why is that so? Why is it that so many people do not surrender to the Supreme Lord? And that question is being answered in the next verse, the next section. Okay, so the 15th verse. Navam dushkritano moda prapadyante naradhama maya paritagyana asuram bhavam ashritaha. Those miscreants who are grossly foolish, who are lowest among mankind, whose knowledge is stolen by illusion and who partake of the atheistic nature of demons, do not surrender unto me. So you can see the first sentence of the purport Srila Prabhupada raises that same question. It is said in Bhagavad Gita that simply by surrendering oneself unto the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one can surmount the stringent laws of material nature. So this point of question arises, how is it that educated philosophers, scientists, businessmen, administrators, and all the leaders of ordinary men do not surrender to the lotus feet of Sri Krishna, the all-powerful Personality of Godhead? Okay, so that's the question that is being raised. And the answer is that these four kinds of people, they do not surrender. Why? Because they are dushkritinaha. So what is the meaning of dushkritina? Prabhupada gives a nice definition in the third paragraph. The atheistic plan makers are described herein by the word dushkritina or miscreants. Kriti means one who has performed meritorious work. The atheistic plan maker is sometimes very intelligent, meritorious also, because any gigantic plan, good or bad, must take intelligence to execute. But because the atheist brain is improperly utilized in opposing the plan of the Supreme Lord, the atheistic plan maker is called dushkriti, which indicates that his intelligence and efforts are misdirected. So that's the meaning of dushkritina. He has intelligence. Srila Prabhupada gives example that just like a thief. So the thief, in order to steal, is using his intelligence. So definitely, he's an intelligent person. So there is some meritorious activity, there's some merit there, that he is intelligent. But the problem is, he's using the intelligence in the wrong way, in the wrong direction. So therefore, he's called as dushkritina. And then Srila Prabhupada gives the examples of Hiranyakashipu, Ravana, who come under this category of dushkritina. Then he describes one by one the four categories of dushkritina. The first one is modas. So the moda basically means the ass. So the ass is said to be grossly foolish, as Prabhupada says. Those are grossly foolish, like hard-working beasts of burden, the ass. So why is the ass called a foolish animal? Somebody can say.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Yes.
That as thinks that when it's summer, he thinks that I eat all the grass, and when it's winter, he thinks I had not eaten grass. That is his mentality.
Okay.
On the same, I wanted to add, Prabhu, that the ass, even though there's abundant grass freely available, but the ass is he thinks that he can only eat the grass when he does the hard work.
Yes, exactly. So the foolishness of the ass is that he thinks I have to carry this huge load of clothes given by the washerman in order to get some little grass. So the foolishness is that he thinks he's dependent on the washerman for the grass. The grass is available everywhere. But still he thinks he has to work hard for the washerman to get the grass. And of course, Prabhupada in his lecture says one more point. He says that, so the foolish ass, he carries this huge tons of load of the washerman, so tons of clothes of the washerman, even though not one cloth belongs to him. Prabhupada says this. So that's his foolishness. So that means he's working very hard, but he does not know what's the purpose. He does not know what's the goal. He's just working. And so he may say that I'm working hard for grass, but the grass is available everywhere. So why he has to work so hard? He doesn't know the goal of working so hard. So similarly, the modern materialistic people also, they are also working very hard, but they don't know what's the goal, why they're working so hard. So that is their foolishness. Okay, somebody read that second paragraph. Most often. So there Prabhupada is describing the materialistic people who are working like the ass. Please read.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam, can I read?
Yes.
Second paragraph, Prabhuji.
Yes.
Okay. The Gita answers this question very.
No. Under the category of modas, the second paragraph. Most often, those who work very hard.
Most often, those who work very hard day and night to clear the burden of self-created duties say that they have no time to hear of the immorality of the living beings. To such mudas, material gain, which are destructible, are like all in all, despite the fact that the mudas enjoy only a very small fraction of the fruit of labor. Sometimes they spend sleepless days and nights for fruitive gain, and although they may have ulcers or indigestions, they are satisfied with practically no food. They are simply absorbed in working hard day and night for the benefits of illusory masters, ignorant of their real master. The foolish workers waste their valuable time serving Mammon. Unfortunately, they never surrender to the supreme master of all masters, nor do they take time to hear of him from the proper sources. The swine who eat the night soil do not care to accept sweet meats made of sugar and ghee. Similarly, the foolish workers will untiringly continue to hear of the sense enjoyable tidings of the flickering mundane world, but will have very little time to hear about the eternal living force that moves the material world.
Yes. So that's the reason why the materialistic people are compared to the asses, because they're working so hard, they're spending sleepless nights, have ulcers in the stomach, so much hard work. But for what? They don't know the goal. And so when they are told about Krishna consciousness, chanting the holy names, they say, I have no time. So they're working so hard, but they don't know what's the goal of working. That is their foolishness. Yes. So,
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, you're not audible. Sometimes your voice goes faint.
Okay. So anyway, when I turn a little bit inside. Okay, so the point is that the materialistic people are compared to the asses because they don't know the goal of human form of life, even though they're working very hard. So that's why they're compared to the mudas. And as Prabhupada in many of his lectures explains, that as far as basic necessities of life, even the animals are getting without much endeavor. Prabhupada gives the example of the elephants. The elephants, they are eating tons of food every day. And it's not that they're going to some factories, they're doing some jobs, anything like that. So they're easily getting their food. So if the animals, the birds, Prabhupada gives an example of the birds also, the birds get up in the morning, they go to some tree, the fruit is available, they eat that. So if the animals and the birds and the bees, they can get their basic necessities so easily without much hard work, then why the human beings think that they have to work so hard to get even basic necessities? So that is the foolishness of the materialistic people. Okay, fine. Now the next type of Dushruti is called Naradhama. That means the lowest amongst the human beings. Nara means human, and Adhama, Adham means the lowest. So Naradha means the lowest. Of course, Srila Prabhupada gives a very precise definition of who is Naradhama. So in that same first paragraph, Srila Prabhupada writes that the civilized form of human life is meant for man's reviving the lost consciousness of his eternal relation with the Supreme Truth, the personality of God, Sri Krishna is all-powerful. Whoever loses this chance is classified as Narada. Okay, so one has a human form of life. He has all the facilities to perfect his life, but still he loses it. Then he's called as Naradhama. And then Srila Prabhupada explains how 99.9% of the population is actually Naradhama. And then he gives the examples of Naradhama. The typical examples of Naradhama, he says, is Jaga and Madhai. So they are typical examples of Naradhama, but they were delivered by Nityananda Prabhu. So similarly, these days also, so many Naradhamas, most people, in fact, as Prabhupada is writing, 99.9% of the population are Naradhamas. And so therefore, following the footsteps of Nityananda Prabhu, it's important that we preach this message of the Bhagavad Gita so that people can take advantage and be delivered. So this is the second category, Naradhama. Now the third category is Maya Aprita Jnana. Hare Krishna. Sorry, there was a power cut. So, so somebody can read the next one regarding the Maya Aprita Jnana. Somebody can.
Shall I start? There are a great number of Maya Pratyagya Jnana at present moment, even amongst the scholars of Bhagavad Gita. In Gita, in plain and simple language, is stated that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There is none equal to or greater than him. He is mentioned as the father of Brahma, the original father of all human beings. In fact, Sri Krishna is said to be not only the father of Brahma, but
Wait
also...
a second. Where are you reading? Okay, fine.
In
Go
fact, In fact, Sri Krishna is said to be not only the father of Brahma, but also the father of all species of life. He is the root of impersonal Brahman and Paramatma. The soul, the super soul in every entity is his plenary portion. He is the fountainhead of everything, and everyone is advised to surrender unto his lotus feet. Despite all these clear statements, the Maya Pratyagya deride the personality of the Supreme Lord and consider him merely another human being. They do not know that the blessed form of human life is designed after the eternal and transcendental feature of the Supreme Lord. Shall I continue?
Yes.
All the unauthorized interpretation of Gita by the class of Maya Pratyagya outside the purview of Parampara system are so many stumbling blocks on the path of spiritual understanding. The deluded interpreters do not surrender unto the lotus feet of Sri Krishna, nor do they teach others to follow this principle.
Right. So basically the Maya Pratyagya, they are learned people, as Prabhupada is an example of philosophers, scholars, scientists. So they definitely have knowledge, but it's all misdirected. So it's all misdirected for sense gratification and maybe some intellectual satisfaction and things like that. But they don't understand the real goal of life. So therefore, they have knowledge, but the real knowledge is stolen away by Maya. So therefore, they're called as Maya Aprita Jnana. And the fourth category, the last class of the Shruti, is called as Asram Bhavam Ashrita, or those of demoniac principles. And they are openly atheistic. So they are openly atheistic, don't believe in God. So they're called as Asram Bhavam Ashrita. So these four categories of people don't surrender to the Supreme Lord. So now the next question arises. So who surrenders? Who surrenders to the Supreme Lord? And that's answered in the next verse. Chaturveda bhajante mam jana sukritina arjuna artho jigyasu arthati jnani cha bharatarshava. O best among the Bharatas, four kinds of pious men begin to render devotional service unto me: the distressed, the desire of wealth, the inquisitive, and he who is searching for knowledge of the absolute. So these are the four categories of people who surrender to the Supreme Lord. And why do they surrender? Because they are sukritina. Unlike the previous verse, it was said they are all dushkritina. So here it is said that they are all sukritina. So what is the meaning of sukritina? Srila Prabhupada describes in the purport. So he says that unlike the miscreants, these are adherents of the regulative principles of the scriptures, and they're called as sukritina, or those who obey the rules and regulations of the scriptures, the moral and social laws, and are more or less devoted to the Supreme Lord. So they're called as sukritina because they follow the scriptures, they follow the rules and regulations of the scriptures. So therefore they're called as sukritina. So now these four categories of people, they are approaching the Supreme Lord, but they are approaching with some motive. They're approaching with some motive. So there are these four categories. The first one is artha. Artha means those who are distressed. Jigyasu. Jigyasu means those who are inquisitive. Artharthi means those who want wealth. And Jnani means those who are searching for knowledge of the absolute. So we will read this commentary of Vishwanath Thakur on this verse. Somebody can please read.
Hey Krishna Prabhu.
Yes.
Types of worship me. Those who follow the rules of Varnashrama worship me. Among them, some desires relief from affliction, from calamities of like sickness, from desire of knowledge of Atma or desire
Oh,
of
that, wait. So that is the first category. The first category is Artha. Artha means those who desire relief from affliction, from calamities like sickness, or so many other calamities. They could be calamities like losing job, losing or losing some near and dear ones, and so many calamities there could be. So in order to get relief from such calamities, then one approaches the Supreme Lord. That's the first category, Artha. Go ahead.
Atma or desire of knowledge of scriptures with grammar, and some
Okay,
desire.
so that's the second category, that is Jigyasu.
Okay.
So Jigyasu means they desire knowledge. Okay, so this knowledge is basically not transcendental knowledge, but it may be sattvic knowledge, like knowledge of Atma, or it may be simply some mundane knowledge, like knowledge of scriptures with grammar. So it is somewhat related to spirituality, but it's not pure spirituality. So they have some desire for knowledge, which is maybe we can say sattvic, but it is not totally transcendental. And so therefore, these people are also said to have a material desire. So desiring such type of knowledge, being inquisitive for such type of knowledge, jigyasu. This is also a material desire. Okay, go ahead.
And some desire enjoyment is life and the next with the land, elephants, horses, women, gold, and other such things.
Okay, so this is artharthi. Those are desiring wealth, opulences in different ways. So they are called as artharthi. Okay, go ahead.
These persons worship me. These three are sakama grahasthas. The fourth type, the Jnani, a sannyasi, the pure heart who worship me with devotion is nishkama, without material desires.
Okay, so these three, the first three who have material desires, they are approaching the Supreme Lord. Why they are approaching the Supreme Lord? Because they're sukritina, because they have some pious credits. So therefore they approach to the Supreme Lord, but they're approaching with some material desires. So therefore they're called as sakam. And mostly because grihasthas or the householder people tend to have all these material desires. So therefore he says they're sakam grihasthas. So the jnani is one who basically, he has a desire to gain knowledge about the Supreme. He has a desire to gain knowledge and realization of the Supreme. And so these come under the category of jnanis that you have studied in the first 6 chapters, the jnanis. So first of all, there are those who practice Nishkam Karma Yoga, then the Nishkam Karma Yogi becomes a jnani. So these jnanis, they don't have any material desires. Basically, they want to realize the Supreme Absolute Truth. That is their desire. Of course, the other desire of the jnanis may also be to merge into the impersonal Brahman. So that's also a contamination. Okay, so in this way, these 4 categories, they're approaching the Supreme Lord, but they're basically approaching with some material desires. Please continue.
These 4 types of devotee qualified for Pradhani Bhutaha Bhakti, in which Bhakti is principal component, have been enumerated. The first 3 types of persons have Karma Mishra Bhakti. The 4th type has Jnana Mishra Bhakti. Later in the book, Yoga Mishra Bhakti will also be described in the work like Sarva Dvarani Samaya.
Okay, fine. So basically this type of bhakti is technically called as Pradhani Bhuta Bhakti. So what is Pradhan? Pradhan means prominent. What is most prominent? The bhakti is most prominent. Pradhani Bhuta Bhakti. The bhakti is the principal component. Bhakti is most prominent. But along with the practice of bhakti, they also have some material desires. That's a contamination. That's a contamination of the bhakti. So the first three categories, that is Artho, Jigyasu, and Artharthi. These first three are called as Karma Mishra Bhaktas. What they're practicing is Karma Mishra Bhakti. So it is Bhakti. Bhakti is predominant, but there is a contamination of fruitive desires, desire for getting some sense gratification, getting some results out of the practice of Bhakti. So therefore, they're called as Karma Mishra Bhaktas, or they're practicing Karma Mishra Bhakti. And the fourth category that is mentioned here, the Jnani, is practicing Jnana Mishra Bhakti. So again, Bhakti is prominent, but then there is a contamination of Jnana, that is a contamination of mental speculation, desire for liberation. So these are the contaminations within the practice of Bhakti. So they're called as Jnana Mishra Bhakti. And then in the 8th chapter, Krishna describes Yoga Mishra Bhakti. So in this way, these people, they are practicing Bhakti, but there is a contamination in their practice. And according to what type of contamination they have, they are classified as Karma Mishra Bhaktas and Jnana Mishra Bhaktas. But then Kevala Bhakti means Bhakti without any contamination. So that is described in the first verse of the 7th chapter, as we discussed yesterday, Maya Asakta Manapartha. So Krishna is speaking about the stage of Asakti, which is a very elevated platform. So that's indicating pure devotional service. And then in the next chapter, we will see 8.14. So that is also talking about pure devotional service. In the 9th chapter, 9.13, 9.20. So all these are talking about Kevala Bhakti or Shuddha Bhakti. So these are the two categories of mixed Bhakti, or Bhakti along with some material contamination. So, okay, so Srila Prabhupada is describing about these this mixed devotional service in his lecture. Please read.
He is pious, he is distressed, but at the same time, he is foolish. Why he is foolish? Because he does not know that God is with me, within my heart. He is sitting along with me. The soul and the super soul, both of them are sitting together. And God knows everything about me. So I do not require to pray from God to get me out of this distress. He knows everything. Why shall I pray? He leaves everything to the God. He prays to glorify the God. How great you are, not for the personal interest.
Sorry, this is a problem with this online. So whenever there's a power cut. So yes, we were discussing about, yes, Karma Mishra Bhakti and Jnana Mishra Bhakti and Yoga Mishra. So these are three types of mixed devotional service. It's not pure devotional service. So Karma Mishra Bhakti means basically one is practicing bhakti, but he has a desire to get some fruitive gain from the practice of one's bhakti. So that is called as Karma Mishra Bhakti. So one may be practicing bhakti, but if he has a desire that by practice of bhakti, one should get wealth or name and fame and things like that, posts and positions, and that's Karma Mishra Bhakti. So Jnana Mishra Bhakti means there's contamination of Jnana. So contamination of Jnana means either one is speculating about the conclusions of the scriptures, or one has a desire for liberation without desiring service. So this is Jnana Mishra Bhakti. So this is a contamination within the practices of bhakti. Now Prabhupada is speaking about this in his lecture. Please read.
Hi Krishna Prabhuji, can I ask one question?
Please, no, we'll just complete the discussion. Please read from this.
Prabhuji, can I read?
Go ahead.
He is poised, he is distressed, but at the same time he is foolish. Why he is foolish? Because he does not know that God is with me, within my heart. He is sitting along with me. The soul and the super soul, both of them are sitting together. And God knows everything about me. So I do not require to pray from God to get me out of this distress. He knows everything. Why shall I pray? He leaves everything to God. He prays to glorify the God. How great you are, not for his personal interest.
Continue.
Oh God, give me my bread, give me my dress, give me my shelter. Therefore, one who is pure devotee, he does not pray to God for any personal interest. Even if he is distressed, he say, "Oh Lord, it is your kindness. You have put me in distress just to rectify me. I would have been put into more and more 1,000 times in distress, but you are giving me little, that's all. That is your great mercy. That is his vision. He is not disturbed. A person who is in Krishna consciousness, he does not care for all this material distress or insult or honor because he is aloof from this. He doesn't. He knows very well that this designation, this honor, or this insult, they are pertaining to my body, but I am not this body. One who is completely conversant with Krishna science, he knows very well I am not this body. I am part and parcel of Krishna, my eternal relation with Krishna.
Okay, so yes, Srila Prabhupada is explaining. So one who understands that after all, Krishna is there within the heart. He knows all my desires. So why should I pray to him for some petty things, petty material things? So if Krishna wants, he will give. And if Krishna wants, he will give distress. So whether it is happiness or distress, a devotee always accepts it as the mercy of the Lord. So therefore, a devotee should be practicing pure devotional service. And in the purport, Srila Prabhupada therefore mentions that these are not pure devotees because they have some aspiration to fulfill in exchange for devotional service. Pure devotional service is without aspiration and without desire for material profit. Quoting Bhakti Rasamrit Sindhu, Anya Bilashata Shunyam Jnana Karmadhyana Avritam Anukulyena Krishnano Shilnam Bhakti. So one should render transcendent loving service to the Supreme Lord Krishna favorably and without desire for material profit or gain through fruitive equities of philosophical speculation. That is called pure devotional service. When these four kinds of persons come to the Supreme Lord for devotional service and are completely purified by the association of a pure devotee, they also become pure devotees. So now we have classic śāstrī examples for each of these categories. So who is the Shastri example for Artha, one who's in distress? Anybody can say?
Gajendra.
Yes?
Gajendra.
Yes, Gajendra. Yes, Gajendra is an example of Artha. He was in distress, his leg being caught by the crocodile. And that's the reason why he called out to the Lord for help. Okay, now who's in the category of Jigyasu? Inquisitive.
Sukandi.
Huh?
Sukandi.
What was that?
Hindi. Sunakandi. Something like that.
Parikshit Maharaj, Puji.
Parikshit Maharaj, of course, he was a pure devotee. He was inquisitive to know about Krishna. But here we're talking about mixed devotees.
Sunkadi Rishi Prabhu. Something.
Yes, Shaunakadi Rishi.
Shaunaka.
Yes, Shaunakadi Rishi come under the category of this Jigyasu, inquisitive. Correct. Then who is the example for Artharthi, desirer of wealth?
Dhruva Maharaj Prabhu.
Yes, Dhruva Maharaj. So these are the classic Shastri examples for these three categories. And who is the example of the Jnani?
Sukadeva Goswami.
Yeah, Shukdev Goswami and the four Kumaras. So these are the example of Jnanis. So Srila Prabhupada is writing here that when these four categories of people, they come in contact with devotees, they come into the association of devotees, then by that association, they can also become pure devotees. When these four kinds of persons come to the Supreme Lord for devotional service and completely purified by the association of pure devotee, they also become pure devotees. So therefore, Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, on the whole, when the distressed, the inquisitive, the seekers of knowledge, and those who are in need of money are free from all material desires, and when they fully understand that material remuneration has nothing to do with spiritual improvement, they become pure devotees. As long as such a purified stage is not attained, devotees in transcendental service to the Lord are tainted with fruitive activities, the search for mundane knowledge, etc. So one has to transcend all this before one can come to the stage of pure devotional service. So pure devotional service is free from all these various types of contaminations. Okay, any questions on this discussion?
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Yes?
Prabhu, Guna Bhuta Bhakti is what, Prabhu?
Yes, so Gunabhuta Bhakti means the bhakti which is contaminated by the three modes. It is similar. So that Lord Kapila describes in the third canto of the Bhagavatam. But basically that's also basically another term for mixed devotional service. The devotional service is contaminated by the modes. Anything else?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yes.
Prabhuji, I did not understand the difference between Jigyasu and Gyanis. Can you please explain again?
Okay, fine. So as we just read in the commentary, so Jigyasu means one who's inquisitive to gain some material knowledge, basically. Material knowledge, or we could say sattvic knowledge, like knowledge of Atma, that is sattvic knowledge. But that is also not totally transcendental. Or one is inquisitive about maybe even mundane knowledge. So those are the people who are coming in the category of Jigyasu. So they have inquisitiveness, but it is not inquisitiveness for knowing about pure devotional service, Krishna. It is not that type of inquisitiveness. So it is inquisitiveness to gain some type of knowledge. And the Jnani is more elevated. So the Jnani is one who is actually trying to realize the supreme absolute truth. So therefore, he's on a much more elevated platform than the others. because he's not desiring some mundane material things, he's desiring liberation. But of course, the desire for liberation is also contamination. But then that is like a better desire than simply desiring some petty material things. Is that okay?
So, like Shukadev Goswami was a pure devotee. So why is he in Jnani?
No, so Shukdev Goswami, before he became a pure devotee, he was a jnani basically. He was simply meditating on the impersonal Brahman, and the goal of his life was to merge into the impersonal Brahman, get that type of liberation, Sayujya Mukti. But then later on, it's only because of the association of Vyasadeva and his disciples that he became inspired to become a pure devotee. So initially, he was not a pure devotee. By the association of Vaishnavas, he became a pure devotee.
Okay, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, like you said, Jigyasu might have inquisitiveness for knowledge of Atma, which is also not transcendental. Why is knowledge of Atma not transcendental? Like Atma is above the modes. No?
Yes,
So,
because that is also called a sattvic jnana. Because knowing simply about the Atma is not sufficient, isn't it? So one has to rise above that and come to the understanding that the Atma is a relation with the Supreme Lord. Then one can try to establish that relationship. So simply understanding I'm not the body, I'm spirit, soul is not the ultimate goal. So there is self-realization, and then after that there has to be God realization. So that getting simply sattvic knowledge about the Atma, that is also not sufficient. It is not on the not totally on the transcendental platform.
when we start talking about relationship with the super soul, then it starts becoming transcendental.
Yes, that's definitely transcendental.
And one last thing, like Shaunaka, the rishis were specifically asking about Krishna and his pastimes. So,
Yes, so if you read the purports in the Bhagavatam, so there Srila Prabhupada explains that in that assembly, actually it was a mixed audience. So there may have been karmis, jnanis, yogis, bhaktas, everyone were there. But then at least the head of that assembly was Shaunak Rishi. He was a pure devotee. And so because Shaunak Rishi was a pure devotee, then everyone got the benefit of that association. But actually in that assembly, there were many other categories of people also.
thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Okay, fine. So
Hare
now,
Krishna. Prabhuji.
okay.
Prabhuji, like Harshita Mataji was asking, so you said this Jigyasu is not pure devotee, and they are on the sattvic level. So can we understand by way of Keshav Kashmiri, like he was also having so many śāstrī knowledge, but pure devotional service is not this. So this type of people can be put in there.
Yes, that's correct.
So Prabhuji, here Prabhupada mentioned in the first category is mudhas and the second category is naradhama. So both are not working to for the main purpose of the human life, to awaken Krishna consciousness. Both are working hard like S's, and they are saying that we don't have time. So this is quite similar. So what should be the point of difference that differentiates between the two categories?
Okay, so specifically the mudas are those who are foolish like the ass, and so they are working very hard. So actually, if you see the examples that Prabhupada is giving, for Naradama is giving the examples of Jagai and Madhai. So Jagai and Madhai, so they were simply indulging in sinful activities, grossly sinful activities. So you can see that the Naradama, as the name itself suggests, that lowest amongst the mankind. So actually the Naradamas are even more lower than the Mudas, because at least the Mudas are working hard. That means they're influenced by the mode of passion. But the Naradamas are being influenced by the mode of ignorance. And so therefore they are basically involved in intoxication, illicit relationships, and things like that. So therefore the example of Jagai Mata is.
Prabhuji, you just mentioned, thank you Prabhuji for this reference also. You just mentioned to Harshita Mataji that this Gyani is not desiring, is desiring for liberation, like you said. I don't know, because when you were showing the Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's notes, it was written there that this Gyani does not have a desire for liberation.
Yes, he may not have a desire for liberation, but his understanding is that the impersonal Brahman is supreme.
Yes.
So that that incomplete understanding of the supreme absolute truth is a contamination. So he doesn't have the complete understanding. So therefore, his goal is basically to achieve the impersonal Brahman.
Yes, Prabhuji, but in the later verses, Krishna says that out of the all four Gyanis, the most dear.
Yeah, that's the next verse. Yes, that's the next verse. So anyway, so we'll come to that discussion in the next.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
So 17th verse, let's recite. Tesham jnani nityayukta eka bhaktir vishishyate priyo hi jnanino tyartam arham sacha mama priyaha. Of these, the one who is in full knowledge and who is always engaged in pure devotional service is the best. For I am very dear to him and he is dear to me. So here Krishna is saying that amongst these four categories of people, that is the Artha, Arthati, Jignasu, and Jnani, the Jnani is the best. Why he is the best? Because Eka Bhaktir Vishishyate, because he has bhakti. And he is very dear to the Lord. Priya. Priya hi jnanino atyartham is very dear to the Lord. So why? Prabhupada, he begins his purport by saying, free from all contaminations of material desires, the distressed, the inquisitive, the penniless, and the seekers after supreme knowledge can all become pure devotees. But out of them, he who is in knowledge of the absolute truth and free from all material desires becomes a really pure devotee of the Lord. So the reason why the Jnani is very dear to the Lord is because he does not have any material desires. Unlike the other three, he does not have any material desires. So basically the Jnani, he thinks that the impersonal Brahman is the supreme absolute truth, or he thinks that that is the highest realization of the absolute truth. And so because he thinks like that, so therefore he is, so the Jnani basically on one hand, generally, some may not have desire for liberation, but generally the Jnanis have desire for liberation. That's one thing. And the second thing is that the Jnanis have an incomplete realization of the absolute truth. They think that the impersonal Brahman is supreme. And also we find that the Jnanis, they speculate to understand the absolute truth. So their methodology of trying to understand the supreme absolute truth is mental speculation. So these are the defects of the Jnanis. But at the same time, because they are free from material desires, unlike the other three, so therefore they are classified as, or here Krishna says that they are the best amongst the four types. All right.
So in this way, they have the greater chances to take up Krishna consciousness.
Yes, that's correct. Because he's already free from material desires. So therefore, a slight association with devotees and immediately they take to pure devotional service. And that's the example of both the four Kumaras as well as Shukdev Goswami. So we see that how Shukdev Goswami, he was a Brahmagyani. He was meditating on the impersonal Brahman, even in the womb of his mother. And of course, he was totally free from material desires. In fact, he did not even want to come out of the womb because he was so afraid of Maya. So he didn't want to be affected by the material energy. So that's how pure he was. But at the same time, he was attracted to the impersonal Brahman. So then we find that as soon as he heard some verses from the disciples of Vyasadeva, then immediately becomes a pure devotee. because he's already free from material desires. So such jnanis very easily become pure devotees. Similarly, the four Kumaras also. So the four Kumaras, as we know the past time, when they tried to enter Vaikuntha and then they were cursed, or rather they became angry, they cursed Jaya and Vijay. So at that time, when Lord Narayan comes to settle the matter, then as soon as they see Lord Narayan and they smell the tulsi leaves on his lotus feet, immediately they become pure devotees. They come to the level of prema. So the jnanis definitely, they can very easily become pure devotees because they're already pure. They're free from material desires. Only slight contamination is their imperfect realization of the absolute. All right.
Yes, Prabhuji, thank you.
Okay, fine. So amongst these four, the jnani is the most dear to the Lord. Now the next question may arise, okay, the jnani is most dear, but what about the remaining three? Are they dear or not? So then Krishna answers in the next verse. Udar sarva evete jnani tva atme me matam astita sahi yuktatma mameva uttamam gatim. All these devotees are undoubtedly magnanimous souls, but he who is situated in knowledge of me, I consider to be just like my own self. Being engaged in my transcendental service, he is sure to attain me, the highest and the most perfect goal. So here Krishna is saying that all of them are magnanimous souls, Udara, all of them are magnanimous. Because why? Because at least they're approaching Krishna. At least they're approaching Krishna. So as Prabhupada writes in the purport, the Lord says that all are magnanimous because anyone who comes to the Lord for any purpose is called a Mahatma or a great soul. And then he says the devotees who want some benefit out of devotional service are accepted by the Lord because there is an exchange of affection. Out of affection, they're asking the Lord for some material benefit. And when they get it, they become so satisfied that they also advance in devotional service. Okay. But the devotee in full knowledge is considered to be very dear to the Lord because his only purpose is to serve the Supreme Lord with love and devotion. Okay, so Krishna does say that all of them are magnanimous because at least they're coming to the Supreme Lord instead of taking shelter of some other materialistic people or just trying to become free from the problem on one's own. At least they're coming to the Supreme Lord and requesting the Lord to free them from the problem. So therefore, all of them are called as Udara, magnanimous. But still, amongst the four, the jnani is the most dear to the Lord. So now the next question may arise. So then how much time does it take for an ordinary jnani to become a pure devotee? And that Krishna answers the next verse. Bahunam janmanamante jnanavan ma prapadyate vasudeva sarvamiti sa mahatma sudullabha. After many births and deaths, he who is actually in knowledge surrenders unto me, knowing me to be the cause of all causes and all that is such a great soul is very rare. So the ordinary jnani, so he practices his path of jnana yoga, gradually gets purified, and then by the association of devotee, may come to the path of devotional service. But all this definitely takes a very, very long time. So that's what Krishna is saying. Bhaunam janmanamante. So for a jnani to come to the practice of pure devotional service takes a very long. So this is the third section of, or the fourth section of the chapter, describing the, first of all, the mixed devotional service, Karmishra, Jnanamishra, and who is the best amongst them. Okay, so here we have quoted some few verses from the Chaitanya Charitamrita, where Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami is describing what does the Lord think about a devotee who has material desires. Now, somebody can read this.
If one engages in my transcendental loving service, but at the same time wants the opulence of material enjoyment, he is very, very foolish. Since I am very intelligent, why should I give this fool material prosperity? Instead, I shall induce him to take the nectar of the shelter of my lotus feet and make him forget illusory material enjoyment.
Yeah, so this is how the Lord thinks. So when the Lord sees that a devotee has material desires, then the Lord thinks, oh, this devotee is so foolish. So therefore, the Lord thinks this person is murkha. Hey, murkha, vishakena diba. Why should I give material sense objects to this foolish devotee? I am not foolish. So what will I do? Swa Channamrita Diya Vishaya Bulaiba. So Krishna thinks I'll give him my Channamrit and make him forget his material desires. Of course, Krishna has his own ways to give Channamrit. He puts the devotees into difficult situations by which the devotee becomes purified of the material desires. But in any case, the point is that when Krishna sees a devotee having material desires, he takes some action because he's not pleased with that type of devotional service. Okay, so now coming to the next section, misplaced surrender, demigod worshippers and the impersonalists. So now, we have seen those people who for fulfillment of various material desires, they approach the Supreme Lord. But not everyone approaches the Supreme Lord when they want their material desires to be fulfilled. So some, instead of worshipping the Supreme Lord, they worship the demigods. So why do they worship the demigods? And what is Krishna's viewpoint on that? That is described in the next verse. Kame ste rita jnana prapadyante anya devataha tam niyamam astaya prakritya niyata swaya. Those whose intelligence has been stolen with material desires, surrender to demigods, and follow the particular rules and regulations of worship according to their own natures. So here Krishna is calling those who worship the demigods as Ritagyan, very less intelligent. So why these worshippers of the demigods are called as less intelligent? Somebody would like to say.
It's like instead of watering the root of the tree, you're watering every leaf or branches.
Okay, that's a good analogy. Yes, instead of watering the root of the tree, they are watering the leaves and branches. Okay, fine, that's right. So, yes, so why are they called as foolish or less intelligent? Somebody else.
Hare Krishna.
Yes.
Because the results obtained from the demigods are temporary.
Okay, that's also correct. That is coming in the next verse, next few verses. So Srila Prabhupada, he gives one more reason why they're called as Vritagyana. So Srila Prabhupada writes in his purport after the Akama Sarvakama verse. Less intelligent people who have lost their spiritual sense take shelter of demigods for immediate fulfillment of material desires. So generally such people do not go to the Supreme Personality of Godhead because they're in the lower modes of nature, ignorance and passion, therefore worship various demigods. And following the rules and regulations of worship, they're satisfied. The worshippers of demigods are motivated by small desires and not know how to reach the supreme goal. So that is one reason why they're called as less intelligent, because they have petty material desires and they want to satisfy them. So then Prabhupada writes, because in Vedic literature, there are recommendations for worshipping different gods for different purposes. Those who are not devotees of the Lord think that for certain purposes, demigods are better than the Supreme Lord. So this is their foolishness. So they think that for certain purposes, the demigods are better than the Supreme Lord. They will be able to satisfy their desires better. So that is their foolishness. And that is what Krishna is saying, that those who worship the demigods, they are less intelligent or foolish, even though they may follow the rules and regulations of worship of the devatas. But because they don't understand this fact that ultimately the devatas are also not independent. So therefore they've been described as foolish. So now in the 21st verse, Krishna is describing the relationship between the demigod worshippers and the Supreme Lord. Yo yo yam yam tanum bhakta shraddhaya chitumikshati tasya tasya chalam shraddham tameva vidatamyaham. So I am in everyone's heart as a super soul, As soon as one desires to worship some demigod, I make his faith steady so that he can devote himself to that particular deity. So here Krishna is saying, I only give the faith to the living entity to worship the Supreme Lord. So you see how everyone is so much dependent on the Supreme Lord. So even if somebody wants to worship a demigod, unless Krishna gives permission for him to do so, he cannot do. So Krishna only has to give faith, Krishna has to give permission. Only then somebody can even worship the demigods. And after all, Krishna is just Paramatma. So unless he gives that faith to the living entity, it is not possible for one to even worship the demigods. So now a question may arise. So on one hand, Krishna is saying that demigod worshippers are less intelligent. And on the other hand, we find that Krishna himself gives faith to the demigod worshippers to worship the particular demigod. So why does Krishna do like this? So if Krishna wanted everyone to worship him, then he should not give faith to those who want to worship the demigods. So then why he allows them to have faith in him? Yes, any thoughts?
To increase the faith, I think.
Increase faith in what?
Increase the faith on at least have to Shraddha has to come for that.
No, that is okay, but then what is the use of Shraddha in the demigods? So Krishna himself is condemning that in the previous verse.
Hare Krishna, because in the Vedas, the different worships of different demigods is given just because people will have those inclinations, and they will aspire for this. So where will they go? So that's how it comes up.
Okay, fine. So this is definitely a valid reason, and that is different people have different desires, and so there is a system in order to fulfill the desires of these people. But then the next question can arise, but Krishna can even control desires. He is omnipotent. He can even control the desires. He can eradicate the wrong desires. So instead of criticizing them that they're less intelligent, Krishna could have just erased off all the material desires.
According to their modes, Krishna is arranging it.
What is arranging? So that is the question. So Krishna can change these desires.
Okay. In the purport, Prabhupada is writing that if he does not give such facilities, then there is no meaning to independence.
Okay, that's correct. So because the jiva has the minute independence, so therefore Krishna doesn't totally influence that little independence. But then somebody may ask the question that why doesn't Krishna do that? If worship of the demigods is not the right thing, then Krishna can influence the independence and force the person to worship Krishna. Why doesn't he do that?
Because he wants Jiva to genuinely love him, not the forcefully.
Yes, that's correct. So because the ultimate goal is to develop love for the Supreme Lord, and love can only be voluntary. Love cannot be forced. And so therefore, Krishna doesn't interfere with the minute free will of the living entity, because Krishna doesn't want to make everyone like a robot. So he wants everyone to exercise their free will and actually worship the Supreme Lord with love. And that's what Prabhupada explains in the first paragraph of his purports, that how Krishna has interfered with the free will of the jiva. Yes, at the end of the first paragraph, Prabhupada writes, the answer is that if the Supreme Lord as Supersoul does not give such facilities, that is the minute independence, then there is no meaning to independence. Therefore, he gives everyone full independence, whatever one likes. But his ultimate instruction we find in the Bhagavad Gita. So Krishna gives independence, but then he also gives instructions as to how we can lead our life. So one should give up all of the engagements and fully surrender to him. That will make man happy. Towards the end of the purport, Prabhupada also explains that the particular mode of the devotional attitude of the living entity towards a particular type of demigod is also arranged by the Supreme Lord. The demigods cannot infuse the living entities with such an affinity. Okay, so the demigods have no capability to give faith to the people to worship him. Because they cannot do that. The demigods cannot infuse the living entities with such an affinity, but because he is the Supreme Lord and the Super Soul who is present in the hearts of all living entities, Krishna gives impetus to man to worship certain demigods. Okay, fine. So the faith also Krishna is giving. 22. Sorry.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu, one doubt, Prabhu. What can I ask?
Oh.
Prabhu, but in from Satyuga, we are saying that Hiranyakashipu was praying to Brahmadev. And whereas in Dwapar Yuga, Treta Yuga, we are praying, saying that Lord Shiva, they are praying. And when we see in Dwapar Yuga also, they are praying to Indradev for in Nand Maharaj times. All were worshipping different demigods in all yugas. But that time, how they, through Vedas, they were trusting or other things?
So, of course, the worship of demigods is there in the Vedas. That's the whole Karmakanda section of the Vedas. What is Karmakanda? Worship of the Devatas to get material desires for fruitive gain. So, that is Karmakanda, which is a part of the Vedas. What is your question?
Prabhu, but in all yugas also, they are praying to different demigods. We're not only in these yugas, in every yugas, they are praying demigods.
Okay, demigods are always there.
Okay.
It's not demigods are only there in this age, no? They are always there.
Okay. Only for material desire we have to go for demigods. Otherwise, you should not go to demigods.
So that is what Krishna is saying. That even if one wants to worship the demigods, that faith in the demigods is also given by Krishna only. So ultimately, if the demigods are able to give benedictions only by the grace of Krishna, then why one should worship the demigods? Why not worship Krishna directly?
Yes, Prabhu, that they got, we see Dhruva Maharaj also was for getting material desire only while.
Yes, that was initial.
Initial stage. But afterwards, through Narad Muni's instruction, he got a material desire, make into spiritual desire.
Right.
But why not case in other cases, only on Dhruva Maharaj case, that I want to see.
What only in Dhruva Maharaj case, what happened?
Dhruva Maharaj was also trying for material desires, but he got spiritual desires afterwards.
Okay.
He was doing follow the instruction. Why other also tried for tapasarya or everything austerities, but they got only material desires.
Who got only material desires?
Hiranyakashipu and Ravana also we see, Prabhu.
Okay, they got material desires. So
yes, but Dhruva Maharaj also since starting stage he was struggling for.
Okay, fine. So there's a big difference there. So as far as Dhruva Maharaj is concerned, of course he had material desire, but who gave him instructions?
Okay.
Huh?
Narad Muni has given instruction.
Yes. So Mahabhagavad devotee like Narad Muni gave instructions. And that is why he became purified of the material desire. So that is the advantage of taking shelter of Krishna and the pure devotees, even to achieve material desires. Then one actually gets purified of those material desires. So because Dhruva Maharaj, he worshipped the Supreme Lord according to the instructions of Narad. So therefore he became free of the material desire. But Hiranyakashipu, he simply worshipped Brahma for getting his material desires fulfilled. So by simply worshipping the devatas like that, then it is like business. So the person, he worships the devata according to the rules and regulations mentioned in the scriptures. And the devata is also obliged to fulfill the desires of the particular jiva. So it is just like business. So Just like if I go to a shop, I give certain amount of money, and then whatever is worth that money, I get in return. So the same thing. But in the case of Dhruva Maharaj, it was not like that. So he worshipped under the instructions of Narad Muni. So that makes the whole difference.
One more thing, bro. Narad Muni was not his desire, but he has came in the picture. But how he got Sukruti of that? He got that blessings or something like that?
Of course, he also had a mother who instructed him to worship the Supreme Lord, isn't it? So therefore, she became the Pad Prataksha Guru. And because she instructed him to worship the Supreme Lord. And so therefore, he went to the forest basically to achieve the Supreme Lord. Though he had material desire, he went with the intention to worship the Supreme Lord and satisfy. So then, seeing his determination to worship the Supreme Lord, then Krishna made that arrangement for Narad Muni to come over there because of his great determination to worship the Supreme Lord, even if it was for a material desire. Hiranyakashipu had no such desire to worship the Supreme Lord. Rather, he wanted to kill the Supreme.
Okay, bro. Thank you. Bro, there is any example who went to Krishna and for material desires, but he got not get, and he'll come in bhakti only. Like that, everybody who come to Krishna's will get only bhakti, like that, bro. Is any example who can get material desire also?
Dhruva Maharaj is the example. Then later Krishna gave the material, fulfilled the material desire also. He became a pure.
Ultimate spiritual only, bro. That is.
That is true because okay, Dhruva Maharaj was in that right consciousness that ultimately everything belongs to Krishna. But then the fact still remains that he got his material desire fulfilled, isn't it?
Okay.
But then, of course, he didn't enjoy that kingdom for sense gratification. He did it as service. Okay. Text 22. So now, okay, one more point that another question can be raised is that ultimately, if one has to practice pure devotional service as ultimate goal for everyone, then why is this karma kanda at all given in the Vedas, and how does one get purified by worship of the demigods? Somebody would like to answer? Why is this karma kanda at all mentioned in the Vedas?
Because
It's according to
sorry, Mataji, please go ahead.
Mataji. Okay, thank you, Mataji. Prabhuji, because it's depending upon their gunas, that in which gunas they get attracted to some specific demigod, and rather than be atheist, it's a gradual path towards ultimately towards Krishna. By the time they purified.
Yes, so that's correct. So you said it's a gradual path. There's some purification. So how does purification take place when one worships the devatas?
So, Prabhuji, when a person who isn't totally atheistic, so there is no chance that he will be worshipping. He will get some, some kind of sukriti or elevation in spiritual sense. But one who is little advanced, they will approach to demigods. So at least they can understand that there is some authority to whom they should go and beg. And then gradually they will go up.
Okay, that's a good point. At least they're following the Vedic authority. So that definitely purifies them. But there's another important point as to how the demigod worshippers get purified.
By doing,
because they are doing it. doing it with the shastras, according to the shastras. Ultimately, they
Okay,
are following.
okay, fine. Yeah,
what
that's correct.
goes
So they're
in
following the Shastras, they're following the Vedic authority.
But Prabhuji, can I add one line?
Ah,
But even if after getting all the material acquisitions and everything, they will, at one point of time, they will feel that everything is temporary. Then they
okay,
will
that
find a solution that what is permanent.
okay, that is fine. But how does one get purified? By worshipping the Devata. So an important point is, okay, so Prabhupada describes that in this lecture. Please read.
Why it is recommended that you worship these demigods? Because if one goes for fulfilling the desire to a demigod, there is a connection of Vishnu. Because any yajna you perform demigods, there must be Vishnu first. The mantra says that with the sanction of Vishnu's order, you get this facility. So by worshipping the demigod, if he's sensible man, one day he'll come to know that above the demigods, there is Vishnu. So why I am worshipping these demigods? Why not Vishnu?
Okay, fine. So therefore, this is the main way the purification takes place. So there is Vishnu in these mantras that they chant while worshipping a demigod. Vishnu is also there. So usually we find in demigod worship, at least in the beginning and the end, there is chanting of the names of Vishnu. Many times we even hear chanting of Hare Krishna Maha. So that is the main way they get purified, by chanting the names of Vishnu even in demigod worship. Okay, fine. So now text 22. Sataya Shraddhaya Yuktastasyaradhanamihate Labate cha tata kaman mayeva vihitani tan. Endowed with such a faith, he endeavors to worship a particular demigod and obtains his desires. But in actuality, these benefits are bestowed by me alone. Okay, so you can see that how everyone is dependent on the Supreme Lord. So the worshipper also is dependent on the Supreme Lord, because the faith which the worshipper has in the demigod, that's given by the Supreme Lord. And the demigod is also not independent. So the demigod can give benediction to the worshipper only by the sanction of the Supreme Lord. And that's what Prabhupada writes. The demigods cannot award benediction to their devotees without the permission of the Supreme Lord. The living entity may forget that everything is the property of the Supreme Lord, but the demigods do not forget. So the worship of the demigods and achievement of the desired results are due not to the demigods, but to the Supreme Personality of Godhead by arrangements. The less intelligent living entity does not know this, and therefore he foolishly goes to the demigods for some benefit. But the pure devotee, when in need of something, prays only to the Supreme Lord. Asking for material benefit, however, is not a sign of a pure devotee. So that is how ultimately everyone is dependent on the Supreme Lord. And then as far as the benedictions which they receive, what types of benediction they receive? 23rd. Antavattu phalam tesham tadbhavatyalpamedasam devan devayajo yanti madbhakta yanti mamapi. Men of small intelligence worship the demigods, and the fruits are limited and temporary. Those who worship the demigods go to the planets of the demigods, but my devotees ultimately reach my supreme planets. So antavattu phalam tesham. So even the phal, even the result that they get from the worship of the demigods, that's also temporary, because the demigods are material. The benedictions they give will also be material. So therefore, ultimately, even the benedictions one receives from the demigods is going to be material. But one who worships the Supreme Lord, then ultimately goes back to the abode of the Supreme Lord eternally. So that is the difference between worshipping the demigods and worshipping the Supreme Lord. So even if one goes to the heavenly planets by worship of the Devatas, even that is not permanent. Shrine Punya Matadokami. They have to come back to the material worlds. So these are some points of difference between worship of the Devatas and worship of the Supreme Lords.
I have a doubt.
Okay, go ahead.
So, we go to Lord Gopeshwara Mahadev when we go to Vrindavan, and we hear from the acharyas that at least the senior devotees that we should go there when we enter Vrindavan to see.
Hmm.
So what category that falls under? And also the subsequent question is, can you please clarify between demigod Lord Shiva and Lord Shiva? What's the difference?
See, so when we go to this Gopeshwar Mahadev, so we know that first of all, their Lord Shiva, he became a gopi to enter the Ras Leela. So that means basically, there the worship of Lord Shiva is not as a demigod to get some material desires fulfilled, but we see him there as a pure devotee of the Lord. Of course, Lord Shiva is always a pure devotee. But most often people worship Lord Shiva to get their material desires fulfilled. Now, Vaishnavas can also worship Lord Shiva, but then they worship him as a Vaishnav, the topmost Vaishnav. So that type of worship is not wrong. When one, of course, it's not necessary that one needs to worship Lord Shiva. But even if one does so with the proper understanding that he's a Vaishnav, then it's correct. There's nothing wrong in that. But most people, when they worship Lord Shiva, they worship with a desire to get material desires fulfilled because they know that Lord Shiva very easily fulfills material desires. So that type of worship of Lord Shiva, that's being condemned. But if one worships Lord Shiva with the correct understanding that he's a Vaishnav, then that is perfect. So in the Bhagavatam, we have the example in the 4th canto of the Prachetas worshipping Lord Shiva. But then they did that with the correct understanding. And as a result of that, they are the darshan of Lord Vishnu. So that's the point. It depends upon what's the consciousness with which one worships Lord Shiva.
Thank you. And the difference between Lord Shiva and I'm just always a bit not sure about there are different types of Lord Shivas. Is that correct?
No, Lord Shiva is Lord Shiva always. So it's not that. Of course, there is the eternal Sadashiv in the Mahesh Dham. And in the material world, there are also the various Rudras. So the Rudras are material in the sense that they are temporary, they're born from Lord Brahma, and they essentially have the function of annihilation of the material universe. So that's in regards to the Rudras. But there is the Sadashiv aspect of Lord Shiva, who is eternal.
So he remains after Lord Brahma, also vanishes during the...
Yes, he is eternal basically. He is as good as the Supreme Lord. He is eternal. All right. Okay. So this is regarding demigod worship that Lord Krishna is describing in this section of the Bhagavad Gita. Okay, so our time is up for today. So I think so we can conclude for today and we'll continue our discussions in the next class. So next class is on Monday, I suppose, right?
Yes, Prabhu.
Okay, fine. So thank you all very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai, Samved Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu, sorry, the organizers, isn't this class supposed to go till 9:30?
Yes, Prabhuji, as I was informed, it was supposed to go till 9:30. I don't know.
Seems like we need to ask, we should question because, yeah, I think, yeah, maybe there's a confusion.
Yes, Prabhuji, the timings came from Yagna Prabhu, that the Vishnu Prabhu has said himself that he will take the class from 7 to 9:30. But he himself took it till 9 o'clock.
Even yesterday it finished early, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
I will ask about the same to the Yagna Prabhu.
Okay.
Yes, Prabhu.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Thanks.